Hi, this is Dr.Alvarado, and you are watching or listening to the Harmonize Your Life Conversations on Self-Care for Women of Color podcast. I want to welcome you back to our podcast conversation. We are yet in the month of September, and we have had a dynamic time with empowering speakers. This month, we're talking today about radical self-care, but all of our conversations are about health and wellness, self-care, and particularly our target audience has been women of color. While we appreciate all women and we encourage all women to listen to our podcast, we are specifically geared these conversations toward women of color because we recognize that in many cases, in those communities, in our communities, these conversations have not been heralded or had to the degree that maybe they should. And we recognize that there are some systemic things that lead to some of our health issues, our wellness issues, and the like. And so we're going to continue with this month or this week with the conversations that we've been having all month. And I have a dynamic woman that's going to be sharing with us on today on the subject of radical self-care right after this. All right. So we have in the podcast studio with us today, Pastor Sheleta Fomby. Pastor Fomby is our guest on today. I call her my little sister, my younger sister in ministry, not because of any less value or anything, but just because I think I'm about 10 years older than her. So she calls me big sis and I call her little sis in ministry. And so I want to introduce to you properly our guest on today. Our guest today is the Reverend Sheleta Fomby. She has a long and distinguished record of kingdom service in the body of Christ. She is currently the co-founder and co-pastor of the New Life Church Incorporated in Laurel, Maryland, serving in partnership with Reverend Omari K. Hughes. She formerly served in various multi-campus roles at Reed Temple AME Church under the dynamic leadership of the Reverend Dr. Lee P. Washington and Reverend Dr. Matthew L. Watley. In this role, she held various executive leadership roles and responsibilities, which have benefited the membership, to include Director of Discipleship and Development, Director of Church Life, Women's Ministry, Director of Small Groups Ministry, Congregational Care, Managing Minister of Evening Worship, and a host of other key components within the life of the Reed Temple AME Church organization. Reverend Fomby is the former senior pastor of the Hemingway Memorial AME Church in District Heights, Maryland, located in the 2nd Episcopal District. Her historic appointment marked the first time a woman was elevated as pastor in this congregation. Under her leadership, the church has experienced congregational revitalization and expanded kingdom witness. Reverend Fomby is a native of Washington, D.C., receiving a Bachelor of Science in Human Resources from the University of Maryland. She then completed her Master of Divinity at Wesley Theological Seminary and with a focus on African American church studies. She is currently pursuing a Doctor of Ministry at Pittsburgh Theological Seminary with a focus on risking faithfully to engage the work of decentering whiteness and nurturing an anti-racist community as Christian formation. She is a well-known preaching woman of God. I've actually introduced to her ministry through many women in ministry conferences that she and I have both been privileged to serve over these past years. And I'm so delighted to have her in this conversation with me today on radical self-care. Will you help me welcome Reverend Sheleta Fomby? Thank you for being here with us today, Reverend Sheleta.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Toni, for this esteemed invitation, this opportunity to share sacred space with you and your community. And I am so honored to be with my big sis in ministry today.
Thank you. I'm glad. And I just want to say before we get started we delve deeper into our conversation, I love the fact that you rocking your gray, sis.
It was time. And I was losing the battle.
Yeah.
And you know, with silver hair, gray hair, white hair, whatever we want to call it, it's a different process. It can be quite resistant to color, and so this is my crown. This is what the Lord gave me, and so I'm going to embrace it wholeheartedly. I was scared though, Toni. I have to tell you the truth.
I understand. I went through that phase several years ago. Last year I went natural, and that was a journey. That's been a journey in and of itself. But I started embracing my gray several years before, where I was still getting it permed, but I had to stop coloring it because, like you said, gray just does not color, and it was just I was chasing gray. And finally my hairstylist said, you know what? We need to just go on and rock this gray. And, my family, we gray early. My mom was silver. My sisters, all of us are gray. Yeah. And my grandmother. So it runs in our family. And I was like, you know what? This is who I am. And I said recently in a post that part of my going natural and walk in accepting my gray hair was a part of my overall self-care and self-acceptance and self-love. And as you know, sometimes as women of color, we have issues around self-acceptance, self-love, based on our skin color, our body size and shape, our hair textures, and things of that nature. And so I'm just so happy when I see us embracing whatever that looks like, embracing it and owning it. And girl, you are owning it and looking good. That melanin is popping.
Right back at you.
It's popping. Well, Pastor Sheleta, this has been a long time coming, having you on the show. I've been wanting to get you on here since we launched this podcast last year. And I believe this is the right time to have this conversation with you and I. And so just share a little bit. I read your bio, but you know what I always say about bios? I always tell people our bio is it's the things that we put out there about our accomplishments and things of that nature. And we should, right? But there's a story behind the bio, right? And sometimes people look at us and they see the things we've accomplished that they read in our bio, but they really can't appreciate it until they know at least a little bit of our story. And so I just want you to share a little bit of your story, your ministerial journey, and just how you came to this place of self-care with the backdrop of your ministry journey.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I think back to when I first answered or recognized publicly anyway, my call in ministry. I was a member at that time at Reed Temple AME Church under the leadership of Reverend Dr. Lee Paul Washington. And I come to join that ministry in a very broken state and stage in life. I was actually going through a divorce. Many people do not even know that I was once married and I am divorced because the bulk of my public life, I've been divorced. And so at the time I joined Reed Temple AME Church, I was young, I was really, really broken, but I knew I had a call on my life. The Lord actually called me to ministry to preach at the age of 16. And I received the Lord Jesus Christ at a very young age. And so by the time I'd gone through the military and came back home and was in the process of going through a divorce, I was at a state in life where I was trying to find a new church home. someone recommended Reed Temple AME Church, someone that I worked with at that time. I was working in the federal government and had been an employee in the federal government here in the Washington, D.C. area for about 13 years at that time. And I'll never forget, a colleague came to me, and this man was always evangelizing me on the job. You know, I knew the Lord, but I really, you know, I was young and kind of doing my own thing at the same time. He knew what I was going through in life. He knew I was relocating. He knew I was divorcing. He knew I was moving. And I'll never forget. He came to me and he said, well, little girl, you moved. I want to know where you're worshiping. And I said, I don't have a church home right now. He said, I'm going to recommend a church. And to this day, it turns out that person was Reverend Dr. Ronald Boykin, who turned out to be a very prominent ministry in the denomination that I was formerly a part of. But fast forward, it was there at Reed Temple that I acknowledged my call to ministry. My father in ministry was so wonderful in embracing the call that was on my life. And the Lord called me away from federal employment. So when I entered ministry, I was also entering into a water walking season, if you will. I knew God was taking me away from federal employment, but I didn't know how things were going to work out. And I will never forget, Dr. Toni, going into Dr. Washington's office and saying to him, I need prayer and I need, wisdom, spiritual wisdom. I think God's calling me to seminary and calling me to go into ministry, but I'm afraid, I'm single. I don't know how I'm gonna care for myself. Long story short, I left his office that day with a job offer for a position that did not exist before that meeting. And the rest, as they say, is history.
It's history.
Made up a job opportunity for me in that moment that gave me the encouragement to then resign. The Lord blessed even more. I got a scholarship from seminary, and here we are, 16 years later. And it's been a faith walk at every turn. As you mentioned in my bio, I just launched a new endeavor. We planted a brand new church, brand new ministry here in the Maryland area, and God.
And girl, you brave because you planted the church in the middle of the pandemic. I love it. I love it.
And God has honored that work. He's blessed it and multiplied it, and so we're grateful.
Good.
Yeah.
So being in ministry, how many years now?
About 16 years.
16 full-time ministry.
Yes.
Full-time ministry.
My first foray was full-time.
Yeah. So you and I both know, because we've been pastoring this year. I've been pastoring alongside my husband for 29 years.
Mama.
And which is really by when I turn 60 in 2023, I'll be 60, and it'll also be my 30th year of ordained ministry. So by that time I was
you're not 60. You're not about to turn 60. Come on, sis.
Yes, I'll be 60 in 2023.
Get out of town.
I'm 58 now.
Look at your neighbor and say #goals.
So, but by that time I would have spent half my life in ministry.
Wow. Yeah.
When I think about it,
Yeah.
So I've been thinking a lot about that lately, especially in during my sabbatical that I just returned from. But so you and I know the toll that ministry can have on us.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons I wanted us to talk about radical self-care, the term radical self-care, and because a lot of times in our profession, and in many of our circles, particularly African-American church settings, self-care is not something that we preach. It's not something that has been taught, and a lot of times not modeled. Right?
You're right.
And so, so when you hear the term radical self-care, what does that mean for you when you hear that term?
Yeah, when I think of self-care, I think of life-giving practices that feel and feed the well.
Feel and feed. I like that.
Feel and feed our soul, because we can fill our souls with a lot of things that don't really nurture or feed us. Right?
Oh my God, that's so good.
And so I think of it as a practice. And if I'm being very transparent with you and your viewing audience, listening audience, I'm still learning this way of life. These are fairly new practices that I'm trying to incorporate consistently. And I think that's what makes it radical for me. In a space, in a time when there's so much that's impinging and infringing on our time, it requires a certain kind of intentionality to do this thing consistently. Yeah. And so there has to be sort of this radicalized sort of approach to it. And so I think, of self-care just being these regular rhythms of rest, where we are choosing to relinquish and release the frenzied, frantic, frenetic pace in life. And you know what it's like serving in ministry at the level at which, you all serve and leading a global ministry in the way you are. I mean, it's demanding, and you find yourself in this cycle many, many, many times where there has to be something that sort of disrupts that to pull you into that frenzied and frenetic place. And so, in my mind, that requires a kind of intentionality. Where you're vetting, even silencing, which is something that I'm really learning to do, these external voices, right? Yeah. With the singular goal of being more attuned and more attentive, if you will, to the longings and the yearnings of my soul. And I found myself many times, many seasons, neglecting, quite frankly, to do that, much to my peril. I'll just say this, the church fathers often spoke of this idea called otium sanctum, which is this whole idea of holy leisure. Yeah. And I think that's what self-care is. It's just this sense of bringing balance to our lives, bringing peace and ushering and inviting that into our lives so that we can behold the beauty and the bounty of God's creation. And so that's what I think of.
Yeah. I mean, I'm telling you, you just nailed it, because, and I want us to unpack a little bit of what you just shared. And the first thing is when you talked about, for us, it has to, because of the kind of work that we do, it has to be radical, because and we have to do it in such a radical way because of the totality. Pastoring is one of those professions that takes every aspect of your being to do it.
If you're going to do it well. If you're going to do it well, it takes every aspect of your being. It pulls on you emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, financially, relationally. Yes. I mean, it's so much giving out that if we're not radical about pouring in, filling up and feeding, as you said, I love that, filling my soul and feeding my soul, the right things, right? If we're not radical about it, I mean, being very intentional. And I had to learn the distinction, and I'm still learning. Like I come to this conversation today, kind of in the posture of a student as well, trying to learn from you as well. And so I'm learning the difference between, and not to say that either is wrong, right? Between self-comfort and self-care. Right. Because just my proclivities, my personality, I can binge Netflix or put some ice cream in the freezer, and that's a form of self-comfort.
Right.
But that's not necessarily filling and feeding. That's not necessarily self-care. And so understanding what that difference is, and I think that really requires an intentional practice of listening to our souls. We're listening to so many external voices.
Yeah, yeah.
We are not listening to what our souls are crying out for. And a lot of times, much to the neglect of our souls, we find ourselves in these postures where we're in crisis. And I've been there. I've been there. Yeah.
And I'm glad you used that the dichotomy between self-comfort and self-care, because self-care is not just, because some people I've seen people, I'm doing self-care, I'm doing me, it's all about me. Well, first of all, it's not all about you. It's never all about you. And it's not a healthy approach to self-care. Mm-hmm. So self-care is not selfishness. It's not isolating myself, not having relationships, or just doing whatever I want to do. Because if what I'm doing to myself is not healthy, if it's not holistic, if it's not making me a better person, if it's not helping me to listen more, be more in tune with the Spirit of God, with myself, with my purpose, my destiny, and the community in which God has called me to serve, then that's not self-care. That's selfishness, and it's really self-destructive.
Well, and I think that's where we have to really look at the distinction between self-comfort and how, if self-comfort, again, there's nothing wrong with ice cream. There's nothing wrong with things that are soothing and that are enjoyable. But those things can get out of balance and
can become injurious.
Move into the space of coping mechanisms.
Right? And then the effects of it. So we got to look at what is the long-term effect of what I'm engaging in.
Right.
So if the long-term effect is, if I'm going to binge on a pint of ice cream every night and call that self-care, well, if the long-term effect of that is a elevated A1C level,
well,
15 pounds added to my body, you get what I'm saying? High cholesterol, then that's not, so I got to look at what is the long-term effect of what I'm doing.
And I love this idea of it being a gift to the community, or that it's of benefit to the community, even though, at first blush, it may not appear that way because it's something that I'm doing for me, but I'm doing it for me so that I can show up as a better leader. I'm doing it so I can pour out I can serve and minister out of the overflow.
Right? Yes, that's it. You got it.
You do your people a disservice when you minister from a place of emptiness, right?
Yes.
Because at that point, it's no longer coming from a place of faith or a place of fulfillment and inspiration. It's coming from the flesh because you're empty.
Exactly.
And so, I see it in service to my leadership role. Mm-hmm.
And you know what? And that's the ultimate goal, right? Because God put us in the earth to serve. God put us in the earth to be a blessing. God put us in the earth to be a gift to whatever communities God opens doors for us to be a part of. So what I say oftentimes, Sheleta, is self-care is not only a gift to myself, but it's a gift to everyone that I serve, everyone that I love. It's a gift, because when I come back, see, me taking 2 months off after my mom passed for a sabbatical helps me to come back to my work more whole, more healed.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
And there's a refreshing that can come to what I'm doing rather than being stale. Because when I started my sabbatical, I was dry, I was parched, I was empty, I was tired, I was hurt, I was grieving, hard grieving. You know what I'm saying? I'm still grieving, but I can come back to my work, even though I'm grieving. I come back with another level of comfort, another level of care that I've done for myself. So now, as I engage my congregation or the communities in which I serve, then I can minister, as you say, out of a full cup and not out of an empty cup.
That's right, out of the overflow.
Out of the overflow.
before it, and I'm sure we'll get into it a little later, but even before this pandemic, I had made some radical decisions.
Talk to us about some of those.
So I've gone through a series of painful losses. So I lost my mother about 4.5 years ago. She transitioned and went on to be with the Lord, went from labor to reward. At that same time, and here's what was really interesting about the timing of her transition. It was, 2016 or somewhere around there, 17. And I just preached the Women in Ministry session at Hampton.
Mm-hmm.
That was in June. July, the very next month, I get a call from her saying, I got a call to come to the hospital. They found a kidney. And 6 months later, she gone on to be with the Lord because of complications around that surgical procedure. And that 6-month period, I was so invested in tending to her and being present for her, and would do it all over again.
And I know exactly where you are.
With joy. I say this parenthetical, this has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but let me just say this. One of the gifts I know the Lord gave me during that season was that my grief was not complicated by guilt.
Listen, and that has everything to do with what we're talking about. And I know exactly what you mean.
You grieve differently.
Grieve differently when you know you have done everything you could have done for your loved one. I know exactly where you are.
And so we were there, we were present, we did all we could do in that circumstance. But it wasn't long even after that I experienced a very hard shift vocationally. And in my ministry that caused great disruption and ripples that have been reverberating, and in many ways even until now. And so there was a loss of a personal relationship, a significant other that I was involved with at the time. That relationship ended. I'm grieving the loss of my mother, and then I'm having all of this personal vocational transition, and I never stopped. I never, Dr. Toni, I never just stopped to grieve any of it. I was moving past it, pushing and pushing.
And preaching through it. And
traveling and from this appointment to that appointment to this assignment, and on that plane and on that bus and that train and automobile and doing what we do. And I'll never forget, and this was the second time the Lord has kind of shown up in my life this way. I don't mind sharing with your viewing audience that I have an anxiety disorder. I suffer with violent panic attacks, and I had not had one in many years prior to the incident that I'm about to share. But I'll never forget, I didn't stop. And I don't know why I didn't stop. I just felt like I couldn't stop. Life had to go on. And I was preaching for Dr.Toni Lee, Community of Hope here in Maryland. And we were in the back. It was for a revival for him. And I just had lunch with his mother the other day. We were sharing this story, and she just loved on me so much. But long story short, I had a violent panic attack in his office right before I was supposed to preach.
Wow.
Mom was, I think at that time, she was still in the midst of her crisis. She hadn't quite transitioned, but I knew the end was near. There was just so much crisis in my life. And his mother, we were just doing what we normally do in the back room before we preach. We're just having small talk. And she just asked me a routine question. How are you? And I just lost it. And I had such a breakdown in her office, in that office. And that family loved me, held me, consoled me, rocked me. You know, we kind of chuckle about it now because we're all good friends and family. And Pastor Toni told the people to keep singing. Y'all keep singing. Y'all keep singing while we figure out what we're going to do. I had no idea if I could preach. I mean, I was all but in a feeble position. That was the second time I'd had that type of event in my life. First time I was going through a divorce, Pastor Toni. And I was so ashamed because I had so many dreams relative to my marriage. Wouldn't tell anybody. Close family, friends knew. At that time, I'm in the government. I'm going to work, doing everything, showing up. I'm a superstar on a job, leadership programs, awards, certificates. I'm driving down the Beltway, and I just started deep heaving. Mm. The next thing I remember, I wake up in a hospital. And the doctor says to me, young lady, what's going on in your life? Because you just experienced your first panic attack. Mm. So I had the second one in Dr. Toni Lee's office. And then I had the third one at Hemingway, which was just as recently as 2018-19. I just come back into town from preaching somewhere, and my district, my conference, had a meeting somewhere, and I had to be at some Christian ed type of event. And I'm just moving, racing. And I'm driving down the street. I don't know why this stuff always happens when I'm in my car, but I'm driving down the street, Dr. Toni, and I could just hear my heart so loudly. And then I got dizzy, and I literally panicked. And I rolled down my window. I flagged some guy down, just a random Good Samaritan. And I said, can you call an emergency vehicle? I'm in crisis. That last event
changed you.
Set off some cardiac things and there's some other real health concerns. Mm-hmm. I won't go too far into it, but I'll just say it led to my decision to resign from my church, which at that time was Hemingway, and that had to be probably one of the most painful decisions I've ever made in life.
Radical.
There was so much that was at stake, Dr. Toni, with this prominent appointment. Mm-hmm. And there was so much conjecture that came out of that decision that people had no
idea,
real knowledge of. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's 2019. So I'm grieving my mother. I'm grieving all of this loss. And I just heard God saying, come unto me, all you who are weary, heavy laden. I'm sorry.
No.
And I'll give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Learn of me. And I accepted that divine invitation, and I stopped accepting invitations on the road. I went and sat down. I sat myself down. I was losing it. I was losing me. I couldn't hear from God. I was preaching from a parched desert and dry and barren place. Couldn't get a fresh word, and I just went and sat down, and there was so much chatter and so much being said about decisions that I was making, but I knew that if I didn't do this, I'm not sure how some things may have turned out, you know? So I'm sorry, but yeah. So I know.
No, please don't apologize. Please don't. This do not apologize. This is a safe space. This is why we're having these conversations, because there are people listening to this.
Yeah.
in ministry who need to hear this. And you need to tell your story because there's power in this. This right here is radical. This is why I wanted us to talk about radical self-care, because I didn't know all the details of your story. I'm not a part of the AME church, never have been, but being connected with so many who are, you know, you see things, you hear things, whatever, but I applaud you. That was radical.
It was terrible.
That was radical. You said, I set myself down. I didn't wait on somebody else to come sit me down. I set myself down. I resigned. I did. And you know what? This is what radical self-care is about. People may not understand the decisions that we have to make for self-care.
Yeah.
And they don't have to understand.
Yeah.
But what we cannot afford to do is allow appearances, what other people think, chatter, or whatever shape what we know God is telling us to do when it comes to our own self-care, our own soul care, revival of ourselves. We listen, because at the end of the day, at the end of the day,
I'd had too many episodes of panic attacks, and you know the grace in the episode that I had at Community of Hope with Dr.Toni Lee is just that they're family to me. But that could have happened anywhere on the road. That could have happened in any setting. And so I thank God that happened in a safe place where I was covered and where I was protected and nurtured. But it was a definitive sign that you're not well. You can keep saying you're well, but you're not well. You are literally falling apart. And, you know,
but how many of us, so many of us, because of appearances, because we're on the road, because we've accepted invitations, all those kind of things, how many of us continue and stop? Listen, things don't stop, Sheleta. We stop. And we either stop by choice or we stop by force.
That's right.
And what I'm afraid of for me is I prefer to stop by choice, because if I stop by force, that I don't know what that's going to look like. I don't know what that's going to look like, and I may not recover.
Well, and that's the thing, you know. And so this thing of burnout and this thing of emotional exhaustion is so real. And, you know, I think of, Dr. Toni, the illustration, you know, of a car. You know what it is when you're in a car and you're just driving down the road and you're rolling along and everything is going fine. And then you hit a curb or you hit a bump or you hit a pothole. And what happens is now the car is misaligned.
Right.
And if you keep driving your car while you are out of alignment or the car is misaligned, eventually
you're talking my language.
The steering wheel is going to start to vibrate.
Yep.
And I had to listen to the vibrations of my soul.
And listen, let me tell you something. Not only do you have to do that, but if you don't listen to that misalignment, it leads to other things. So if I continue to drive my car down the road with the steering wheel shaking, then all of a sudden I got other problems in my car. Other things start to go wrong that might not have been anything wrong with my engine or other aspects of my car. But if I just keep pushing and keep pressing, driving out of alignment, it's going to have a ripple effect.
An accumulative cost.
Oh, a cumulative cost. Girl, I love it.
and I don't know that we can pay the cost that it takes on our soul. And so I've started, you know, so I started paying attention and listening to the vibrations of my soul. I noticed that I was irritable. I noticed that I was suffering with insomnia. I noticed that I was chronically fatigued all the time, that I was weepy. And I sat down and I stopped accepting a lot of invitations. And I accepted the greatest invitation of all from God, just to spend time in his presence and allow. And what I've learned over the last couple of years is that when I kept pressing, and when we keep pressing, we do two things. We dishonor our own pain.
Yeah.
And we trivialize our trauma. And we don't take time to say, no, that was devastating. And that requires time to heal and to mend, and for that brokenness to be tended to. And I never afforded myself that time before, but I'm so glad that the Lord spoke in ways that prompted me to just step down, step away, step back, so that I can step up again. And I'm grateful for you. You don't know this, but this is the first time I've ever shared this story publicly.
Wow.
First time.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you for trusting me with your story and our audience with your story. So what are you doing now? Because now you're back. Yep. You're not pastoring the same church, but you are pastoring. Mm-hmm. And you planted a church. And I know as a church planter.
It's hard, is it?
Oh no, it's not the same. It's a little different horse. It's a horse of another color. You know what I'm saying? It takes a different kind of energy to plant a church. Yes. So what are you doing now? What are your self-care practices now? How are you caring for your soul now? Because you're back in ministry, you're back pastoring. Which we're glad, but you're back different.
Yes.
So what are you doing? What are you doing differently?
So I was thinking about our conversation last night, and I've been doing so many things over the last several years, and the Lord just led me to jot it down. Okay. And so I've been resting. And here's how the Lord gave it to me. The R is reclamation of joy. I've been, Dr. Toni, reclaiming my joy.
Okay.
I know that this pandemic has been hard on a lot of folks, but I'm telling you, it has allowed me to grieve so much that has gone ungrieved. It's allowed me to just see myself, deal with myself. But I mean, just reclaiming my joy, filling my cup, dancing and putting on music and drawing. I like to draw and create. Be a creative again. So reclamation of joy. The other thing for me has been establishing these rhythms of integration that allow me to connect with other people. Establishing integrated rhythms where I'm not only connecting with myself, but I'm also connecting with friends and family. We just went on this wonderful trip to Paris. With girlfriends. And so rhythms of integrated living. I'm not just a pastor.
You're not.
I'm an auntie. I'm a sister. I have so many other interests. And so I have a coach. I have a therapist. I have a whole team of folks.
Yes.
Me.
I call it your self-care board of directors in my book. Mm-hmm. I call it your self-care board of directors. My self-care board of directors, that includes my medical doctors for different reasons. You have your general practitioner, and then I have a thyroid condition. So I have an endocrinologist that I see. Then I have my chiropractor that I see once a month, my trainer, my fitness trainer, my therapist.
I love it.
Family, friends. These are people that are on my self-care board of directors. And you know who the chair of the board is? Me.
I get it. I mean, and it's so funny because I'm learning that I don't know that I can manage the whole of my life by myself. I can't. I need others on my team.
You can't. And you know what, Sheleta? God never designed us
that way.
Yeah, God didn't design us to live like that. When God said that it's not good for man to be alone, it's bigger than just marriage.
Absolutely.
But we live in community, and it takes others to help us see those blind spots, to help us see when we do need to rest, see when we are irritable and things of that nature. You know, you may not always see it or know it, but it takes someone sometimes outside of us to help us see those times when we really need to pull away, when we really need to rest. Good. So you got reclamation of joy, and I got here establishing integrated rhythms, and then family and friends.
Yep. And the S is soul care.
Okay.
Doing that's for me, that's inclusive of really doing my grief work, right?
Okay.
Lamenting some profound losses.
Yeah.
And some of that is not just people. Some of that has to do with losses as it relates to seasons in life or dreams or stages, right? And so doing my soul care around my grief work, doing my soul care around just being still in the presence of God, my soul care around, I have a whole sleep hygiene because I was diagnosed with sleep apnea and insomnia. So, I mean, so a whole sleep hygiene, but all of these things tending to my soul. And part of my soul care, in all seriousness, involves soul interrogation or soul inquiry, where I literally, I think is it Psalm 42 or 43, where the psalmist is asking his soul, why are you cast
down? Yes. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I ask, how are you doing today? What do you need today? For me, it may just mean going to the National Arboretum here in DC and just being in nature. I need sunlight today. I need water to sit by the water today. I need color, vibrant today. So all of that soul care for me.
That's
and
good.
The T is time in his presence.
Okay.
That kind of, that's basic, these daily offices, but we can't get away from time in the presence of our Creator. Deep listening. I'm learning that the more leadership responsibility God has stewarded to my hand, the more fervent and effective my prayer life has to become, because I have to enter into periods of deep discernment. I can hear what God is saying and just communing with creation and meditative walks and all those kinds of things. And so that's it. That's what rest, that's what those practices look like in my life right now. I don't know that I do it perfectly.
None of us do.
I struggle with perfectionism and I think
that's probably one of those things that we have to constantly give over to the Lord, because none of us do it perfectly. But the thing is, you're doing it.
Yes, I am.
That's the thing.
I am.
You're doing it. And that explains the glow that I see on your face.
Thanks, Vixen.
And I can honestly say, I remember looking at you at one point and seeing the tiredness in your face.
Oh, I mean, I was so fatigued. And here's what I learned. I learned two things. I learned, first of all, how to hold all things loosely. I have these two new mantras in my life: to hold all things loosely. That's our role as a steward, right? When we hold on to it so tightly that we can't let it go, now we're saying, I'm no longer a steward, I'm an owner.
Right.
And when I lost my mom, it took, the first 4 or 5 months I'm praying a certain way. And then it became clear that I really had to live my faith out in this moment and trust that he loved her best and most, and that whatever decision was made in this situation, that God had me and God had her. And so I had to sort of release that to him and her to him. And what I learned in that moment is, as much as I love my mom doesn't belong to me. She belongs to the Lord. The earth is the Lord.
Thank you for ministering to my soul right now.
And the fullness thereof. So while it's in my care as a steward, I'm going to tend to it. I'm going to love it. I'm going to do my very best. I'm going to give my all. I'm going to pour all of my life into it. But when the one who owns it all says, thank you for your management, but it's time, then I to learn how to hold all things loosely. When I lost some things vocationally and personally and relationally, with friends and family, and it messed with my head and my mind so much. God said again, hold all things loosely. I don't ever want you to hold anything so tightly that if I decide to take it or to transition you or to transition it from you, that you lose you. So holding it loosely doesn't mean I don't love it. Holding it loosely just is recognizing I don't own it. It's not mine. None of this is ours. We don't own any of it. So I learned that. The other thing I learned was pain demands an expression.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, no matter how much I did not want to acknowledge and deal with the pain of my divorce, no matter how much I did not want to acknowledge that pain demanded an expression. It was going to find a way.
Yep.
And it's going to show up. It's going to show up in addictive behavior. It's going to show up in irritability. It's going to show up in overeating. It's going to show up. Pain demands an expression. And what we have to decide, Dr. Toni, is we have to pick our pain. Am I going to choose the pain that's going to lead me down a destructive cycle and my life is spiraling out of control? Or am I going to choose the pain of sitting with a therapist, confronting my brokenness and my trauma, and that pain is ultimately going to facilitate wholeness?
So what's the end goal?
Pick your pain.
End goal. And, you know, I often say when the pain of staying the same,
Mama,
exceeds the pain that it takes to change, then we change.
Yes, ma'am.
Because if I stay the same, I'm going to be in pain. If I change, I'm going to be in pain. But there's a healing, you know, healing, when I have surgery, if it's a healing surgery, I'm going to be cut either way. So am I going to be, you know, while it's cutting me, it's healing me.
Yes.
And it's the same thing with therapy. It's the same thing with when we sit ourselves down, when we go on a sabbatical and just radically care for our soul, care for our mind, care for our spirit. We're more than pastors.
Yes.
We are mothers, we are wives, we are sisters, we are aunts and uncles, we are nieces to somebody. When I went on my sabbatical, one of my things I did was I made sure that I went to spend time with my family. Yes. With family members who I hadn't seen in months or even years through the pandemic. I made sure that I spent time with them. I went to visit my mother's brothers who could not come to her service. And just to be in their presence or just to be around them. I spent time with girlfriends. Some of my girlfriends who I've been knowing all my life, from childhood all the way up to now, at different seasons of my life that represent different phases of my life. I intentionally spent time around them.
Yeah.
Of course, I spent time with my husband and my children, and I spent time with myself. I built me a garden, and I love my garden.
What's in it?
I have roses in there. I have a yellow rose, 2 yellow rose bushes, 2 red rose bushes, and hibiscus plants. I got different flowers because I like flowers. I got a fern, a really nice fern tree hanging off my deck, and I just wanted to go back to, I love plants. I got peace lilies. I like plants. I like flowers. I like fresh flowers. And I said, you know what? I'm going to go back to something that I love. I had dropped it because of ministry, traveling, doing all the stuff. I dropped it. And I went back and picked it up.
I love it.
And it has been one of my ways of refreshing my soul. And I get so much joy out of it. I get so much peace out of it. I hear from God while I'm in my garden. You know, when I go on my long walks or whatever, I'm hiking. I tell people all the time, my exercise is not just physical for me, it's spiritual.
Yeah.
It's a spiritual experience.
It really is. And what I find is just the way that I'm wired. I get epiphanies when I'm walking. I have moments of clarity when I'm doing my daily and morning walks. Things come together and I have these moments where things connect. And questions that I've been wrestling with, all of a sudden because something, you know, I always say when you move the body, you move the mind.
Oh, yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that.
When you move the body, you move the mind. And so I encourage all of those who are watching and listening to really, really, really incorporate that, if you haven't already, you know, into your self-care practices. It's so key.
It's so key. Pastor Sheleta, we could talk all day, because when I tell you this is rich, we done cried with each other. And I want to thank you, because your sharing about your mother has really blessed me today. I'm very, very new in this journey. Mom has only been, it's only been a little over 90 days since mom transitioned. And her journey these last 2 years, I've been writing. My next book is going to kind of chronicle our 2 years with her from 2019 to 2021. Her journey with cancer started then, and our caregiver journey started then. And I thank God even for the pandemic, because the pandemic forced us in a lot of ways to shut down. But I really am grateful to the Lord that I was last 18 months or so, I was able to be with my mom.
Yeah.
And care for her. I worked from home because I lived 10 minutes away. She lived 10 minutes away from me. So I was able to be at her beck and call at any moment. I took her to all of her, most of her radiation treatments, because my sisters, we all had our roles and our different things we did.
Right.
But they didn't have the flexibility on their jobs that I had on mine. And so I took the bulk of taking her to her radiation treatments. She had to go 5 days a week for 6 weeks. And so I took that on, and my sisters would take the Fridays to give me a break and the weekends. And then, so we all worked together. The four of us took care of our mother. And so it's only been 90 days since she made her transition. But I agree with you. I grieve, but I grieve healthily. Yeah. And one of the things my therapist said to me when I started grief counseling was, there is grief and there's complicated grief. And complicated grief is when we get stuck and when we fall apart and all this. And I didn't want to grieve. I wanted my grief to be healthy and not complicated.
Well, I'm so grateful you had an opportunity, Dr. Toni, even in dealing with the grave loss of your mom, but you were afforded those precious moments.
Yeah.
In a way where maybe outside of the pandemic might not have been possible in the same way.
And that's exactly the way I see it, as a gift. Yeah. I see it as a gift. Pastor Sheleta, tell us how we can get in touch with you on social media. I'm going to put this on the screen. Your church is New Life Church right there in Maryland?
Yes, New Life Church. We are in Laurel, Maryland. So super, super excited because, as we've already stated, we launched in a pandemic, which means we never really had a church, a physical church home, because we launched in a pandemic. But we, Dr. Toni, I don't mind sharing because we're going to announce it next week anyway. We have just entered into a lease with Bowie State University, which is an HBCU right here in Maryland. And that is going to be our worship home for the next several years. And we are super excited about this phenomenal partnership. It's going to create so much more space for us to have in-person worship, and we're super excited about it. But you can find us at www.newlifenation.org. And then
let me put that on here, www.newlifenation.org. I'm putting that up there on the screen.
Yeah.
www.newlifenation.org. And I want us to be able to find you there, go there, sow into the ministry, right?
Amen. Yeah. We're a church plant, y'all. And so
that's right. That's right. It's a church plant. We're going to sow into this ministry. And Facebook, we can follow you on Facebook at Sheleta Fomby.
Yes, I'm on Facebook there, Sheleta.Fomby. And then my handles on Twitter and Instagram is Rev Sheleta Fomby. Rev Sheleta Fomby. And so,
and that's Twitter and Instagram.
Rev Sheleta Fomby.
Rev Sheleta Fomby.
And my website is under development at the moment, and so that'll be available prayerfully over the next couple of months. We're doing some things there, but yeah, that's how you can find me. I'm pretty easy to locate on social media. Yeah.
Good. And that's on Twitter and on IG.
Yes. And then on Facebook is Sheleta.Fomby. And yeah, so I'm so grateful. Dr. Toni, you had me on here boo-hooing and crying. And
no, girl, you had me boo-hooing and crying, and this was good. This was really, really good. Thank you again.
Yes.
Thank you. I know that this show is a blessing and going to be a blessing. We are archived on YouTube, and those of you that are tuning in, I just want you to know where you can find us. This is the Harmonize Your Life Conversations on Self-Care for Women of Color podcast with Dr. Toni Alvarado, Toni G. Alvarado. We are on Apple Podcasts. We're on Google, Spotify, Anchor. We're also on the Light Internet Radio show has picked us up and running our podcast there. Go to my YouTube channel. If you've not subscribed to my YouTube channel, please go there, like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. You'll always be notified when a new episode of the podcast is uploaded there. I also want you to know, ladies, that I would like for you to join the Harmonize Your Life Women's Self-Care Network. Last year, we started a self-care network for women around health and wellness, fitness, motivation, inspiration, information, self-care strategies. And we bring women, if you follow my podcast, many of the women that actually have spoken on my podcast are also members of the Self-Care Network. And we bring other women like Pastor Sheleta Fomby and all of our guests who come on our podcast, come in and share with us with Tea Time with Dr. Toni and other things that we have going on in the Self-Care Network. Listen, God designed us to be in community, and so there's no sense in you trying to do this thing by yourself. So come on and join up with us in the Self-Care Network, and we'll do you good on your journey. Ladies, I want you to know, get ready, because I got another fitness challenge coming up in the month of October. So y'all get ready to get fit with me from October 1st to October 31st. And if you go to my website at drtonialvarado.com, you will find where you can sign up for the fitness challenge, and we will email you the instructions, and you can work out with us. And while you're there, go on and get your Harmony Fitness apparel, because we have fitness t-shirts, self-care t-shirts like the one I'm repping right now. We have bling t-shirts and other fitness dry fit wear and fitness pants, so you can be cute while you work out as well. So go on to our website and you'll find all those things. And when you support this ministry, you support us through the Self-Care Network, you help us to be able to produce shows like the one we're producing today with Pastor Sheleta Fomby, and help us get this message of self-care out further into our community. Thank you again, Pastor Sheleta. Thank you. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
I love you. And I look forward to all God is going to do in and through you in this next season of your journey. You have helped us today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Toni. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. All right. Well, we'll see you all next week for another episode of Harmonize Your Life, Conversations on Self-Care for Women of Color, with your host, Dr. Toni G. Alvarado. See you soon. Hi, this is Dr. Toni Alvarado, and I want to personally invite you to join the Harmonize Your Life Women's Self-Care Network. Join us for fitness motivation, health and wellness information, inspiration, self-care strategies, and ideas for creating harmony in your life. As a certified health and wellness coach, it is one of my greatest honors to support women in their fitness, health, wellness, and self-care goals. Join the Harmonize Your Life Women's Self-Care Network, and we will do you good on your journey.